I'd like to call to order the May 10th meeting of the Town of Yountville Zoning and Design Review Board. If we could have a roll call, please.
All right. Member Taggart?
Here.
Member Allen?
Here.
Vice Chair Dorman?
Here.
Let the record show that Chair Cook is excused and Member Laz is absent.
Thank you. Okay, if we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So if there are no changes to the agenda, we could have a motion to adopt it.
I'll second it.
Will you make the motion?
Yes.
Someone needs to make the motion to do it.
Yes, if you'll make the motion.
Wait,
Member Allen?
yeah,
Is that-
I motion we adopt the agenda as stated.
Perfect.
Do we have a second?
I second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Agenda adopted. I don't believe we have any minutes to approve. Do we have any members of the members of the public present who would like to comment on items that are not on our agenda tonight? Seeing none, we will close that item and move to our public hearings. We have, first up, we have the landscaping for the Ryder residence at 8 Staggs View. Item number 16701, design review for front landscape and hardscape improvements. And the way that I would like to do this, unless staff tells me to the contrary, is for each of these items have a staff report. The three of us will ask questions of the staff. We'll ask the applicant to come forward and tell us about their project. Then we will have questions for the applicant. We will ask public who want to come forward and comment on that project to come forward, and then I'm sure we will have more questions for the staff and then a discussion. So that said, let's begin with this item with a staff report, please.
Good evening. So tonight you have before you design review for the complete re-landscaping of the residence at 8 Staggs View Lane, and this is part of the Staggs View Lane subdivision, of which there are 12 houses, and at the time they were all designed with drought-tolerant landscapes for both front and rear yards. They had somewhat of a similar theme to them, but they were predominantly drought-tolerant plants and native grasses. So the applicant is proposing a new theme for the property that consists mainly of concrete pads that will be planted with turf joints in between and with the use of other native and drought-tolerant species such as the Mexican feathergrass, the pittosporum, and the deer grass. And in the bioswale at the front of property between back of sidewalk and curb, they're proposing Berkeley sedge. And the reason this is before you is because it is a somewhat significant change in the aesthetic of the neighborhood from what is existing, and we thought it deserved discussion in terms of design review. We think it is a very interesting landscape and consistent with the farm style aesthetic that's out there. It does show more concrete and hardscape than we typically see in landscape areas, and it also has the use of turf, which is a more water thirsty species, and so those are two of the reasons we'd like to present this to you. And so those are the main two items that ask you to discuss whether you believe that the amount and number of those concrete pads is consistent with the neighborhood. We feel that the project may benefit from the elimination of some of those pads, the 7 that are in the front of the property that could be redevoted and expand a little bit of the drought-tolerant landscaping. And then the staff's only other concern would be the use of turf, because it is a high water use plant, although in this case I note that it is to be irrigated with an EPIC system, which is watering beneath the surface, and so there's not the same overhead spray and the same wasteful water use. They are retaining the oak that was a replacement species for some of the species trees that were lost during the development, and that is to stay. So we are recommending approval subject to the conditions in the staff report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do we want to have, does anybody have questions for staff?
What alternatives would there be to turf if staff had their choice?
There are drought-tolerant grasses that potentially could be a replacement for the turf. They will have a different look and feel and maintenance requirements, so I'd ask that you also direct that question to the applicant.
Okay.
So all the trees are staying?
Correct, yes.
They're not cutting any trees?
Correct.
When you say artificial turf, are they synthetic or what's artificial?
No, there's no artificial turf proposed here. It is live turf. One of the photo attachments can be a little misleading because it shows artificial turf.
Yeah, I'm looking at that.
Actually, one more. And the 7 slabs you're talking about are the ones, if you're looking at the diagram to the right of the driveway, the ones in front?
Right, the ones in the front bordered on the top or on the east
perfect.
side by the walkway, and on the right by the underplantings of the oak.
Got it.
Any other questions? So I have a few, and some of these may be also, you can tell me if they're better posed to the applicant. One thing that I see on the plan, but I don't think was discussed in the staff report, is expand the driveway cut from existing 10 feet to 12 feet. Is that something that we can approve?
That is something that can be approved at the board's level. The driveway cuts were approved as part of the subdivision as a whole, and they took into consideration design standards for driveways where there is a preference for a combination of driveway widths, and they ended up using many of the smaller driveways in this subdivision. In this case, it's posing an issue, and you can see the alignment of the driveway to the garage where the right-hand car has to pull out at an angle, and it's creating conflict issues where they have some meter boxes and other utilities. So this would put those utilities into a rated vault, and it's actually encouraged and supported by our Public Works Department.
And has someone done a calculation of what the percentage of the turf grass will be vis-a-vis the entire lot, the 25%
Yeah.
mark?
No, we haven't had a formal calculation.
Great.
We have. Great.
Great, thank you. And so all of the turf will be irrigated from underground?
Correct.
And so all of this is happening between the sidewalk and the existing porch?
Yes.
All of
Yes.
the pavers and slabs and everything is going in? And has someone done a calculation on the total square footage of the slabs that are proposed versus the total square footage of the slabs that staff has recommended removing, as well as the total square footage of the front yard? Is
We
that
have
better
not, no.
addressed to the applicant?
We have most of those.
Okay, great. Any other questions for staff right now?
No.
Okay, if we could hear from the applicant, please, and if you could introduce yourself, please.
Good evening. I'm Jay Ryder. I'm the owner of the house as well as the original developer of the project. And this is Leslie Ryder, my wife. And Kevin, our landscape architect, is here, and he'll kind of run through a little slideshow and talk a little bit more about the concept that we're proposing. Just a couple of things to clarify. In regards to the drought-tolerant nature of the grass, I'll have Kevin address that. I think there is some drought-tolerant merits to what we're proposing in terms of the species itself. the 10 to 12-foot expansion of the driveway. If you go down that street, almost everybody in the neighborhood has already done that. They've already expanded their driveway by 2, 3, even 4 feet. Probably they didn't come here to ask permission, but they've done that. And I don't think that the little bit that we're expanding, in fact, it helps in terms of getting from the right side garage out to the street. It'll actually help so that we don't, one of the tires doesn't go into the planter strip. But most importantly, I mean, Kevin will talk about our concept. We think it's a great concept that matches the architectural style of the houses and just in the Napa Valley in general. And however, this concept will not work if it is approved with condition number 3. If condition number 3 is approved, which requires the removal of the 7 concrete pads, then we don't want it approved that way, because we'll just go back to the drawing board and come up with something else. So with that, Kevin, you have actually Leslie will say a few things.
Yeah, Kevin's going to go through the slideshow, but I just want to point out a couple things at the end. But it is an incredible, fabulous design, not just here for the Napa Valley. This is the kind of landscaping you're seeing for drought tolerant all over the state of California for people who are taking that step forward, hiring a landscape architect to design something that's actually beautiful and actually improving the neighborhood and improving the value of the property. In addition to that, what some of the things that you need to take into consideration as a design review in a town like this, on that street, we're so fortunate to have seen on our street, and we don't really know the people very well, but there's a lot of families on the street. And when you're designing drought-tolerant landscaping, in theory, it's great, but there are some things that we start to forget. We do have a lot of children, and when you're having bushes, and we have actually, the stuff that we're proposing with the Mexican feathergrass, it's already in the original landscape plan that Kevin designed, that was already in our property. So even though we're putting it in here, it's already there now, and was in the original design. But you can't have children playing in your front yard when they're tripping over Mexican feathergrass and plants all over the front. When you come up with a new landscape design that's spectacularly beautifully designed and modern and looks great with everything, you see children playing and you see people enjoying their street and having fun. So this is something that is not in a report, but it's something that you should think about and consider. And the other thing that I would mention is what I'm seeing on that street is when you're having landscapes that people don't love, they're not taking care of them. So I really encourage you to drive up and down the street and take a look at that and see, that they don't know how to take care of something they didn't really love that much. So I think it's really another piece to think about when a homeowner steps forward and says, wow, we have an opportunity to improve the neighborhood, and I love this, and I'm going to really take care of it. I'm going to spend a lot of money to improve it. I can assure you it's going to be beautiful and will be maintained beautiful for a long time. So that's something to really think about as a board as you look at that. So,
Thank you.
Yeah, just introduce your name and apologize. There's some technical difficulties in setting up the graphics.
Okay, can you be able to see any of this or not?
You'll have to flip it around to
Okay.
show us.
My name's Kevin Levesque, and I'm the landscape architect. I was the original landscape architect on the 12 lots in the 4-unit apartment originally, and so we have a.
Would it be better if you came up here and set it on that table closer to us? I don't know if it's better to have the height there or come closer
Whatever the board
here.
prefers.
Or you can come on the inside, whatever works, just to.
So basically what we wanted to do was create a landscape that complemented the simple farm-style architecture of the home, create something that created a functional front yard, created a water-efficient design, and something that was clean and simple to maintain. We also wanted to try to incorporate the driveway into the design so that we can bring the planting across. So, and this is the current situation. You can see most of the original planting has died out. So, and then this is the plan. So Well, starting at the driveway cut, we don't really, at 12 feet, we don't expand to the point where we cover the water meter. And so part of the issue is backing out. The rear tire is going over the planting. So the extra 2 feet would make a big difference. But there's a water meter there, and then there's a curb cut that's part of the storm drain system that's preserved in this plan. There is a gate over here on this side. There's a gate on both sides. So we need to provide access in here. And then we just take the lawn. We do the native planting around the oak, using that to help screen the transformer that's out there. Then we transition to the paving across the front, and then end it with photosperm along the property line on this side. So we're using this to create a pattern that it will be attractive and be reflected somewhat in the architecture of the building. As far as the square footage, let's see. The total front yard is 1,531 feet of landscape area. That includes the paving and all the planting. The lawn actually works out to be 324 feet at 21%, the shrubs at 266 square feet, and then the paving is 941 square feet. When you take into account, well, that puts the lawn at 21% in the front. When you look at the front and back combined, we have 18% of the lot is in lawn. So there's a small patch of lawn in the backyard. I don't know the difference if we took those 7 pavers out, how much that would amount to. But the pavers are either 2x2, 2x3, or 2x4, so it wouldn't be figure it out. So, the one change we are, well, and then here are with the plants, our main plant palette plus the existing oak. All this is really drought tolerant. Then for the lawn, we're using Medallion Dwarf Fescue. It's a lawn grass that grows very slowly. It's heat tolerant, and it's for a turf lawn, a turf surface, it's relatively drought tolerant. So it's a real pretty low water use lawn. And the slow growing means you don't need to mow it very often. In the planter strip, we have Berkeley sedge on the plans. We'd like to go back and maybe change our plan back to what was originally planned when the project was first built, which was a native preservation mix. It's a native grass blend of 4 native grasses in a sod form that's used for bioswale planting. And we could put that in, and then you'd be totally cover the whole planter strip in green. You wouldn't have little clumps with lots of mulch and stuff. And it would be more effective from the start. So we'd like to do that. And then here are some examples of these kind of projects. This is a driveway for a large stone home. That's what we're thinking. And I think if you change this to a rougher natural or a native grass or something, you wouldn't get the clean lines. It would be a little scruffier look. You'd start to get brown areas in between. You'd be more likely to have weeds growing up in there. So
If you changed it to what?
if you change a regular lawn, turf lawn, like the bonsai, to a native type of grass in these areas, you're going to end up with sort of clumpy grass that looks real scruffy, and you don't get the clean lines, and then you're going to end up with like brown, little gaps between them. You're going to get more weeds and things growing.
So you have drip line between the pads?
Yeah, we would run the inline drip. And per the original approval, project approval, we've already got a smart controller, and all of that's all installed. There's actually an inline drip system in the yard, but it would need to be adjusted and maybe rezoned for this. And then this is what's going on at the neighbor's house. They did the whole front yard in a synthetic turf. we're trying to avoid that. And another example of what's going on in the street. You can see when the weather turns dry, this native sod mix is extremely drought tolerant. So you don't need to irrigate. A lot of times in these bioswales, in C3 treatment areas, people are putting in wetland plants that require a lot of irrigation in the summer because you just planted them in sand. The native mix of grasses is very drought tolerant, doesn't need a lot of irrigation in the summer, yet when it rains and stuff can handle the water in the wet soil. So, that's the current condition of what the planter strips look like in some of the other houses.
And is that what you're calling the bioswale?
Yeah. For the storm drain system. So the water flows down the curb to an opening into this area, down in the planter, back out around the driveway, and back into the planter. So it's to slow the flow of water and take out the particulates and treat it. So, and then these are what the neighbors have across the street. There's a lot of lawn outside of these houses. And this is a new landscape that went in, and there's a large chunk of lawn. It's just hard to see with the shadows and stuff. And that's our plan. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, do we have questions for the writers or Mr. Levesque? Mikhail?
No, I'm okay.
So how far about is it in linear feet from the end of the existing porch to the sidewalk? I drove the street right before I came here, so I've seen it recently, and I'm just trying to get in my mind the actual footage as I look at this.
Maybe.
I believe the building face is set back 20 feet, so the porch may go 6 feet out into that.
Oh, yeah.
So about 15 feet. And in there, you basically want to put 4 courses of pavers. I mean, I know they're 2 by 2, 3, 4, but
Yeah, and when you look at, we've got a sidewalk that goes straight out now, and then we have a driveway, and then most of the paving we're adding goes over and into that second gate, into the side yard, so we're really not adding that much more concrete over the existing.
You take out the sidewalk.
The driveway section's being broken into sections.
Yeah,
and that was a question I had too. You're going to remove the sidewalk.
right, and replace it. And one of the advantages of this kind of is any of the runoff and stuff that lands on the driveway, that are going down the driveway to the street, goes into the planting too. So.
And the areas that are turf, tell me about the inline irrigation, inline drip irrigation. Isn't that just regular irrigation, or so for this and this?
Well, all of this is going to have inline drip, in-ground inline drip. And essentially, it's just it's not like the old drip systems, which have little spaghetti tubes and a little bubbler on the end, and then little spiders and stuff get in clogged. It's a tube that's, I don't know, 1/4 to a 1/2 inch, depending on the system you have. And then you just put a bubbler or an emitter right along the system. And then depending on the kind you get, some of the emitters have a pesticide or a herbicide that keeps roots from clogging it. Some use copper because the roots won't grow to keep them from clogging. You just bury that line, and then the water oozes out and just soaks into the dirt and spreads out. And then the kind of planting determines the spacing of the emitters.
So the bubblers are underground
It's
also?
all underground. And it's extremely efficient. You don't get any evaporation. And the new systems have proven to be pretty reliable. So they're pretty effective irrigation systems. So.
And this may be more for the writers than Mr. Levesque. If we were to approve it taking out the 7 pavers, you would start again? I mean, I'd just like to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, it just kind of defeats the purpose of the concept that we're trying to propose, because then we'd be basically, instead of the patterns that we showed in the slides where you have the pads with the grass strips in between, we're now going back to more of a traditional landscape where we're planting shrubs, and it's going to look like everything else on the street. We're not really interested in doing that. We were trying to create something, that was attractive and that people would want to, maybe other people in the neighborhood would want to emulate. I mean, right now, if you drive down the street, it's really not very interesting.
And to piggyback onto that, I would just say, if that is removed and we have to adhere to those conditions, we probably will do nothing, because, as Jay said, we're trying to make something that we love and that's going to improve the neighborhood, improve our home, and we would only hope that if it is approved as is and we're able to install this beautiful landscape, that perhaps other neighbors might step up to the plate and say, hey, it might be worth getting a landscape architect and doing something that looks beautiful, that we can be proud of and maintain and get excited about and make the street, wonderful and interesting. And I mean, it's fine now. I mean, Yountville is spectacular. I mean, my God, you can't go wrong with this beautiful town. But we were just trying to step it up. I mean, you see the pictures of the way it looks now. It's really not that interesting. And I encourage you to drive down the street and really look closely at all the landscapes to see it. And then you might be able to say, I kind of get what they're talking about. I mean, next door they put in artificial turf. Well, drought tolerant, but boy, go take a look and tell me what you think. It's really not attractive. So we're just trying to find something that's actually what people are doing in landscaping in California, that's on the cutting edge, that's exciting and interesting. I go up and down Napa Valley, although I really don't do wine tasting, but I drive by these vineyards. They're spectacular, and they have all this interesting, modern, drought-tolerant landscaping that's really kind of cool. And you're like, wow, that's what makes Napa so neat. So, to reiterate, I don't know that we would do anything, because I'm thinking in my head, why would I spend all this money for something that we already sort of have? It just doesn't make sense to me. So I guess to answer that question, we probably would just stay as is.
Thank you. And Mr. Levesque, I hope this might be a final question. You're adding a lot of impervious cover, because I'm assuming it's not permeable concrete.
No, it's not permeable.
Okay, so you're adding a lot of impervious cover, so when it does rain, it's all going to go to runoff.
But it goes into the landscape. It no longer goes down the driveway into the street. It'll go into these little turf areas and be picked up. And when you look at...
Well, yes and no. The majority of the front yard's going to be impervious cover.
Right, but it'll flow into the landscape. It's not going to flow across the sidewalk into the street. So, because this little bit will all the water that lands on this pad will drain into this little area and be picked up in the landscape. And when you look at the fact that there's already a walk that comes down, and then the driveway comes down here and then angles over, and here we're adding this little bit and this little bit, and then this part's going to get added because they've added, this is a gate, and this is where the landscape maintenance people and use, so it's sort of a maintenance entrance. So that would be needed to get around there. So it's really only adding this small portion here, because we're replacing the walk here, and then this little triangle here, and these two
And
pads.
you're adding all that.
Well,
That's almost 4 feet, right? It says
It's-
3.8
yeah.
there.
Yeah, so that would be, but they're going to need to add that anyway, whether they go to Home Depot and buy stepstones, because they need a way to get to that gate. So,
Okay, here, why don't you take this before I drop it or something? Thank you. Okay. Any other questions of applicants? Anyone from the public want to speak on this? All right. Any other questions for staff after hearing from everyone?
I would like to know from staff the reason to remove the 7 concrete.
Well, this is before you for design review, so we're looking at it in terms of context of the neighborhood and other design elements. I can share with you that we do not have a prohibition on hardscapes such as this, so that should not affect your decision. If you find that this is, in terms of design review, it is a good project, it could definitely be approved since there is not that prohibition. Also, to address Chair Dorman's comment as to runoff, we did have this reviewed by the Public Works Department, and they review things in terms of stormwater impacts, and they had no issues with that. So even though there is paving, we don't see those impacts either. So neither of those would be hindrances in approving the project if you wish.
Mikhail, anything for staff?
Nope.
Okay. So now we'll open discussion, I guess, among ourselves. We want to start with you, Mikhail?
Sure. I actually am a big fan of the design. I think it's interesting. As the applicant said, it does add something, some character to the street, which I've driven past as well, and I think it brings something new. It's interesting. It's aesthetically pleasing. There's no impact on the runoff, as they mentioned. It all seems to be relatively drought tolerant. Yeah, I'm a fan of it.
Yeah, I think it definitely is an improvement for the neighborhood, and it does go with the farm-style house. I have the pavers in my house, so I know what they're talking about, the drip. It does save a lot of water because there's no evaporation. I have to commend the landscaper for doing that. And my only concern is the staff recommendation of the concrete, 7 concrete, because I don't really understand why either way. To me, it doesn't make any difference, but there's obviously a reason why they were there. So that's why my question was. So.
And I guess in the interest of full disclosure, the home that I owned before this, I did something very similar in my yard, so of course I'm a fan of the design per se. I do still, though, have concerns about the turf grass, but I would defer to staff on that. If you're convinced by Mr. Levesque, I'm okay with that. I also would want staff to weigh in on the proposed change of the Berkeley sedge to the preservation mix. And I also would just like for us as a board to consider how we would feel if we drove down Staggs View and every home had a paved front yard like this. So not that, I mean, we are setting a precedent in some ways of what we might, not that it's not a beautiful design, just as we look at it.
I would almost say the same thing for the artificial turf driving down. I would probably much rather see this than artificial turf on every house that went by. So comparatively speaking, I'm much more of a fan of this than artificial drought tolerant.
Well, I share your concern if we have too much hardscaping. As a neighborhood, if they all do the same thing. It's not as soft, the neighborhood.
So I guess the question for staff is, if this gets approved, is there an opportunity for us as a town to then look at something that says X amount of hardscape versus X amount of softscape for
Yes.
future projects?
Yes,
I think so.
Okay.
there's that opportunity.
Okay. And I also continue to have a bit of an issue with the increased driveway, because having driven down there just now, I mean, I wasn't particularly looking for who had tacked on 2 feet to the side of their driveway, but a bunch of them butted right up to the meter box like yours appears to. So I would not be in favor of increasing the driveway, or I would not be in favor of increasing the curb cut for the driveway until we look at the neighborhood, the street as a whole, the development as a whole, and talk to Public Works about it. I'm not saying I would foreclose it entirely, but I think it might be premature, my
Did-
take.
Question, did Public Works already weigh in on that?
They did.
Okay. And
They favor a wider driveway because it is more usable.
Mhm.
It's just functionally a better design. That sometimes competes with planning objectives where we want to minimize the appearance of a driveway.
Yeah.
Although when you have a driveway and a garage in the front of the parking, on the front of a parcel this way, it doesn't really do much to obscure it or hide it, so it's still there. So, and I look at it as they're only asking for 2 feet.
So you're basically saying we don't need to go to Public Works. It's planning who originally recommended the 10 feet, and now you're okay with 12?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So thanks for that clarification. All right, anyone want to make a motion?
I would like, you mentioned staff weighing in on the Berkeley Sage versus the, is there any differences or anyone? No? Still works? Then I move to adopt as presented without condition number 3 in the conditions of approval.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Congratulations.
You approve.
It's going to look great.
Yeah, now we just have to get it going, right?
All right. Moving to the next item, which is item number 16-767, 2230 Madison Street, Napa Valley Lodge, design review for construction of a maintenance building. And we'll go through the same format if you don't mind. So first, a staff report, please.
Good evening. So tonight you have before you design review for a new building that will house the trash and recycling facilities for the Napa Valley Lodge, as well as enclose a irrigation pump house area. And this is located on the east property line near the driveway. And the reason this item is before you is because Napa Valley Lodge does not have a dedicated trash and recycling facility, and that would, and this proposal brings that aspect to this property. The specifics of the enclosure are it is an approximately 300 square foot CMU block building, and it will have plaster coated stucco and a standing seam metal roof. And as I mentioned, it's located on the east property line, and that is really to facilitate the pickup by the hauler, since they cannot easily navigate the tight turning radiuses of the driveway, and they've indicated that this on-street location works best for them. It is in an area that is under discussion currently for granting to the Napa Valley Lodge, and the town has been in longstanding discussions about the abandonment of the right-of-way. It hasn't been completed, and so what you see is the structure is shown on area that is crosshatched, and so we've included a condition of approval that requires an easement be presented for the enclosure if it's constructed before the abandonment procedure is finalized. And lastly, because this is a screened area used for trash recycling and storage, it is exempt from FAR, and so it does not contribute to that element. We find that it meets the design review findings, and we are recommending approval.
Any questions for staff? Any questions for staff?
So I'm looking on the staff report. It says 1 or 2 parking spots on Washington Street in front of the trash enclosure will be inaccessible during times that trash is collected.
Correct.
Is staff recommending any sort of sign there that says no parking during these hours or anything like that?
There will be a sign. It's not included in the staff report or the conditions, but it would be necessary to let people know that they can't block it during the specific hours of pickup. Otherwise, we're hoping that the lodge discusses with employees that they would encourage them to park in these two spaces when it's not being picked up, because it may serve as a slight deterrent to parking, even with a sign that indicates only during certain hours you can't park there.
Yeah, and that, correct me if I'm wrong, it's gravel that's currently running along the, what is that? The, on Washington Street?
Yes.
On the, and that's currently, okay. And that's owned by Napa Valley Lodge or the town?
No, that area is town right-of-way, but that's the area under consideration for abandonment.
Okay, great. That's all my questions.
Member Allen, any questions?
Not right now.
Okay. So it's a trash recycling and storage building, and we're going from 36 square feet to 298 square feet. Is most of that necessary for the new trash enclosure? I mean,
It
have
is
you gotten any
oversized, I would
impression?
say. I would estimate that 200 square feet is dedicated to the enclosure area. I would say anywhere from 100 to 200 square feet would be adequate to serve the needs of the business. What it does do is allow for some room for expansion or additional trash needs of the business. There's no strict formula as to what size it needs to be.
And then, is there any problem with electrical pumps being next to refuse and the grease? Is there any fire hazard with that?
I will defer to the applicant on that, and that may be something that we can address at the building permit stage to ensure it is a fire-safe structure.
And could we put as a condition of approval that staff sees a service agreement with Upper Valley? I understand they're now using Upper Valley, but could we just condition approval that they have a trash pickup and recycling pickup contract?
We could, however, as noted in the staff report, it's a requirement of properties in town to have pickup. And so now that they've been made aware of that requirement, I don't know if it's necessary, but we can add it.
Okay, and I think that's my concern, is that apparently for many, many, many years, there has not been anything but a van out there. So I would somehow, deferring to my other committee members, but I would like to have that somehow memorialized that that's part of the deal. I have concerns about odors. It's right on the curb. It's right across from the park. It's what can be done, if anything, about that, or is that an applicant question?
I would say that's an applicant question.
Okay. And I think that's all that I have right now. Any other questions for staff before we move to the applicant presentation?
Nope.
Is there anyone from the applicant here? Would you like to tell us about your proposed project?
Boy, there's not a whole lot to say. Such a small building. Jesse Whitesides. I'm the architect for the Napa Valley Lodge. What can we say about this beautiful trash enclosure? The stucco color will match the existing buildings of the Napa Valley Lodge. It's sized, it is a little bit oversized, but it's purposely made that way so it can reach the street for collection. So we can avoid creating two separate structures for the well pump and the trash enclosure. So the irrigation pumps, I guess they are. The irrigation pumps already exist there. The equipment is there. It's laid out. It's sort of in a falling over wood structure at this point. So we'll be removing that and building this around that structure as well. As far as smells go, there is not a lot of food waste that happens at the Napa Valley Lodge. There probably are things that can be done in terms of filtering and exhaust. That would need to be researched, I think. Mm-hmm.
Any questions for the applicant?
No.
I guess my question, following the exhaust and the order to come, particularly in the summer, because People used to park a lot.
Yeah, sure.
Are you going to vent it towards the street, or how are you going to vent the exhaust?
We have two gable end vents. You can see the round vents on the end of the structure, and the gate doors that are to the trash enclosure portion there are fully louvered doors. The louvers are at an angle, so you can't see in. There may be the possibility of using carbon-type filters, which I know I have on my trash can at home, which as long as everything's closed, there's absolutely no smell. So again, that would need to be researched, but they also do not produce a lot of food waste. It's mostly what? Papers and boxes and
Guest room debris.
yeah.
Any other questions for the applicant? Sorry, any other questions for the applicant? So how big are your receptacles going to be? What's your plan for
I believe we're
that?
having 2 4-yard bins, and
What's the size of a 4-yard bin?
oh goodness,
The uninitiated.
They're a 4-yard bin is 60 inches by 72 inches by 48 or something like that tall.
And will they have lids?
Yes, yeah.
And
It's
so-
your standard sort of 4-yard bin that has, the flip over kind of plastic lid on it.
And how will they be emptied?
Somebody from the Napa Valley Lodge will put them out on the new concrete landing pad outside the structure on the day that they get collected, and the trash truck will pick them up and dump them into their truck, and then they will be put back into the enclosure.
So they'll actually be pushed out of the enclosure
Correct.
to be
Yeah.
picked up.
Mm-hmm.
And do you see any issue with having the electrical pumps next to?
Honestly, I don't, but it would be very easy to put an interior wall between the two if you guys have a concern about it.
Like a concrete or a cinder block wall or something?
Well, a non-combustible wall, whether it's
Non-combustible.
treated wood or CMU. Mm-hmm.
And do you know the pickup schedule for Upper Valley? Is it twice a week?
I personally
Is
do
it-
not.
Tuesdays and Thursdays. I mean, Tuesdays and Fridays.
So twice a week, you'll put them out in the morning and bring them in later in the day?
Correct.
And are you all right with the staff's suggestion that you will encourage your employees to park there?
Discourage our employees.
No.
I thought.
No, they want you to encourage them so that the spaces are not filled by the public, so the trash is always accessible.
So they're used.
So you can ask them to move or whatever if you need to get in there on those days.
Do you want us to park there?
Well, that might be a discussion for between you and staff,
Yeah.
but I think that needs to have some
Yeah. I think
offline
it's a good
clarification.
idea. It's a good idea.
So, but you're willing to work with staff to figure out how they want to do that? Okay.
That's no trouble.
Okay. Those are all the questions I have right now. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, is there anyone from the public here who would like to speak on this project, proposed project? Seeing none, any other questions for staff?
Nope.
So I have one, since we're giving up 2 parking spaces for 2 days a week, one of which is a busy day, Friday, is there a way to do a parking management plan at this time as a condition of approval?
We have not proposed one for this project because of the nature of bringing a non-conforming use into conformance with the code, and the impact of that parking management plan, but that is something that can be considered.
So
Our
where
parking
in our,
management plans generally consist of registration of all employee vehicles, and then the monitoring by town staff. I think if we were to have an agreement for the effective use of those spaces outside of collection times, that would satisfy our concern with the loss of the space, potential loss of the space.
So that could be a condition of approval.
Um,
I'm just trying to figure out what we can and can't put in a condition.
I'm
of
just trying to
approval.
think of the nexus, and this is a design review application rather than a use permit application.
Right.
It's generally tied to the use. So
So does this go through will this go to council to
no,
talk about the loss of parking places?
no.
Would it be part of their ongoing discussion of the abandonment and the easement the town will take back for parking?
Yes, I'm sure it will be discussed then.
So
Yeah.
the loss of the 2 spaces could be brought up then?
Mm-hmm. And I said up to 2 spaces. It's a 20-foot wide structure, so that depending on how, well, the street isn't striped there, but ultimately only 1 car could fit if everyone is aligned on the street. I've suggested 2, not knowing what sort of mismanagement there may be out there, but hopefully it'll be minimized.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
I move to approve as presented.
I'll second it.
All right. All in fact, could I suggest a friendly amendment in that I think we need to address in the conditions? I don't have any issues with the enclosure except the non-combustible interior wall. And then do we need to say something in the conditions about we need to get an easement if the abandonment's not done? And do we need to say anything in the condition about the signage, posting the hours? I just posed those, but I don't have an objection to the
Yeah.
structure.
Does the sign need to be mentioned? Or
We can include that if you'd like. Yeah, easy enough.
And the non-combustible wall?
non-combustible wall as well? Or is that more of a,
We could include something like that contingent on if there is a fire hazard based on Public Works or Fire Department inspection during the building permit process, if you're comfortable with that.
That's fine, as long as someone other than
Yeah,
the 3 of us looks at it and,
perfect.
expert opinion. We'll do
Yeah.
contingent on expert opinion inspection to ensure fire safety, something like that.
that's good. Okay.
You want to give it a shot?
No, I think we could just take those as amendments to your motion.
Can we move to approve with the recently stated amendments?
Was there more than 2?
No.
Okay, so the sign and the combustible wall.
Yes.
All right, yes.
And
As
your-
amended.
Your second stands, Barbara?
Yes. I'll
Okay,
second
all in
it.
favor?
Why?
Okay. Thank you.
My God.
All right, we move to the next item, which is item 16-757, a revised master sign plan for the village, currently known as the Whistle Stop Center. And if we could have the staff's report on that, please.
So good evening. Tonight you have before you a master sign amendment for the Whistle Stop Center, which will be rebranded as the Village. And there are 2 design types that are proposed to replace all of the existing brown and white wood signs. The first signs are associated with the JCB Tasting Room and Atelier with JCB, and those signs will be a matte white background with brushed nickel metal letters pinned to an offset from the background. And if you've had a chance to go by the property, the signs are in place, and so you can get an idea of what they'll look like. They are compatible with the gray and white color scheme of the repainted property. The remainder of the signs will be black and white painted signs, both to identify the complex of the village, as well as parking areas and the other businesses on site. And we have examples of both of these signs here. Let's pass around the other one too. And so Included in the staff report, we've attached a matrix that identifies each of those signs based on location, the type, whether it's a monument sign or a wall-mounted sign, what the sign is intended to identify, its dimensions, as well as its area. And I would like to comment that I posed a question to the applicant earlier today about the difference in the wall-mounted signs for Atelier and JCB, since one, the Atelier, which appears smaller, was actually shown as a larger area, and the applicant has indicated that the sign is actually, for JCB, is 11.5 feet by 175 inches, which would be a 13.9 square foot sign rather than the 4 indicated in the staff report. And that is because it would be the letters on a matte background and attached to that header beam. When I went out there, it looked as if the letters were attached directly to the building, which would be calculated at the 4 square feet. So I will turn to the applicant to help us clarify that. If it is the larger sign, it would reduce the amount of available signage that's left. And that was one of the main items that we looked at in evaluating this, is where is the property with the amount of total signage. It's based on the linear square footage at the rate of 1/2 square foot, and that leaves approximately 80.5 square feet, so that it is consistent with that standard. Included in those signs that are counting toward their allotment are the monument sign at the corner of Washington and the Mulberry Street extension, and that identifies the village, shops and services, and that replaces an existing monument sign that is part of the existing master sign plan. The corner building that has Atelier and JCB has one sign each for the businesses, either on the header or from the porch overhang, and those are consistent as well. A second sign is proposed for JCB, which faces the Mulberry Street extension, and this replaces a sign that was part of the original master sign plan, most recently used by Cornerstone, but earlier approved for Images Fine Art when they were in the space. The applicant is requesting permission to add a second sign for Atelier on the north side of the building, and they are seeking a variance. We have not made the variance findings because we find that the justification for that second sign is very difficult to make because it doesn't have a second street frontage. The remaining 2 signs that are counted toward the master sign plan are the 2 monument signs at each of the driveways that identifies the village and customer parking only. Normally, these would be exempt from the sign calculation where they are 4 square feet or less, but where they are larger signs as proposed here and they do identify the village, we've counted them. I've noted in the matrix that many of the site signs are exempt courtyard signs that don't count, and that's because they either face the interior courtyard or they face the parking lot at the rear of the property, which doesn't face a public street. And then there are also a host of parking lot directional signs. And what we see is that the applicant is willing to reduce the number of these signs. Currently, there are 17. They're reducing these to 6. And of those that remain, they're being reduced in size from the 5 square feet to the 4 square feet so that they're consistent with the code. And staff views this as a very positive change for the property. They essentially amount to 1 parking lot directional sign in each of the planters, and we think that it's essential in this case for a business or where 2 businesses share a parking lot really at the heart of town, and where adequate and real functional signage needs to be presented for the functional shared parking of that lot. So we see this as a move in the right direction as to parking lot signs. 2 other signs on the building will remain, and let's see if I know we have a photo of it. They're the ones that indicate Yountville on the gable end that are existing. Do we happen to have any of those 2 signs shown here on the top photo? And those signs would remain, But as you see, the signs above for Whistle Stop Center would be removed as they bring the site into greater conformance with the code. So we view this as a positive change to the master sign plan, and we are recommending approval with the conditions of approval included in the staff report.
Thank you. Any questions for staff?
So for staff, the biggest point of contention is the trying to find that variance, or if there is a variance for the north side sign for Atelier, correct?
Correct. And I would note, though, that that would reduce the amount of remaining signage, which is anywhere from 17 square feet to 27 square feet. So you have to be cognizant of the remaining signage needs for the property for that overland space.
Okay, that's it.
Barbara, any questions for staff?
So what I'm hearing is the sign, there will be less sign for the property.
Yes, there are.
But the total square footage of the sign is not increased.
No, it's not increasing beyond what the master sign plan property is permitted based on frontage.
Anything else for staff? No. So I'm trying to match the call-outs on the signage, the JCB sheet with the staff's matrix, and I can't.
Okay.
I can't quite get there from here, so I apologize. So number 4 on the JCB call-outs, Monument Sign 1, Washington Street. It says it's 8 square feet. And I'm trying to figure out which one.
That's
that
number
one.
5. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, you're asking about number 4?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm asking about number 4, and I'm asking where it is on the
Okay.
staff's matrix.
Number 4 is listed as on the business and complex identification sign, second from the bottom. 16 square feet.
Right. So this JCB says it's only 4 square feet. No, it says it's 8 square feet, sorry.
It's two-sided, so I've counted both sides.
Okay, so it's 8 times 2.
And
Got
that carries for the one below it, too, which would have identified it as 5 square feet. Number 6.
Okay, all right, then that. Okay, so that takes, so then when they have numbers 7 and 8, cornerstone for a total of 11 square feet, staff does not consider those covered by the signage rule, or is that part of our leftover?
We are considering those courtyard signs because of the way they are tucked back there between buildings,
Okay.
even though granted that one section is facing the street.
Thank you. And just to confirm, the one that they want to put on the south side is going to be aluminum, painted aluminum, correct?
Number
Not
1?
wood. No, it'll be the 30 wall-mounted Mulberry Street elevation. That's going to be this like powder-coated aluminum?
Yes.
Okay. And the second sign that is being requested for Atelier on the north building, the end of the north building. When you say the end of the north building, that's the Overland building, right?
No. It's
do they
the
want it
corner
on the-
building, but it's the north elevation, and we have an elevation shown here.
Okay, so they want it basically the upper left-hand corner there.
Yes.
Okay.
Or thereabouts.
And so that would reduce their total allotment of 80.5, correct?
No, that would reduce the total amount of available signage, which is shown as 27.5 on this matrix. They are entitled a total of 80.5, and we've identified what hasn't been used. and haven't accounted for this sign in this matrix.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other questions for staff?
Nope.
If the applicant would like to come up and talk about the project, please.
Thank you. My name is Tom Blackwood, Director of Retail Operations. Good to see everybody again. Thank you for your time this evening. We're very excited about our signage program. The Village is kind of a vision of Jean-Charles Boisset and his vision for Yountville, his French heritage, and our overall plan to bring a village concept here to Yountville and in the former Whistle Stop Center. We have had a great couple of months here in town, almost 3 months now, since we've opened, and we're excited to finally move forward on our sign plan here. So thank you. Let's see, where shall I start? I guess I'll first address the size of the two signs in front of the JCB Salon and Atelier. They are 6 inches high. I think our description was incorrect, and I believe the way they're viewed, it looks differently, as one is hanging on a 4x6 beam over the door. You can see that with me on my phone. And then versus Atelier, where it's actually hanging just above the door. Due to there's a gutter there, so we couldn't mount it to the gutter, so it's right there. But those sizes were confirmed as 6x96 inch aluminum letters. This is a tasting salon, 11.5 inches by 175 by 1/4 thick. And then the Atelier by JCB was also 6-inch letters on an 11.5 by 84 by 1/4 thick white aluminum background. So. Any questions?
So far, and thank you for stopping as you go, the two over-the-door signs are each 11.5 inches tall. One is 175 inches long, and one is 84 inches long.
Correct.
Thank you. Any other questions so far?
Yes, the sign seems to, the new tasting salon sign seems to be bigger than Atelier. Are we expanding the sign size, or?
Staff had measured the JCB Tasting Salon sign based on 6 inches by 96 inches because it appeared to us that the letters themselves were affixed to the header beam. We now understand that it's actually a sign for that full 11.5 by 175 inches, that it is the matte white aluminum, even though it really doesn't look like it to me, which would increase that area in square feet of the sign from 4 square feet to 13.9, and reduce the available signage to 17.5 square feet. Thanks for that clarification.
No problem.
Okay.
Okay.
I think we're good so far.
All
Thank
right. Excellent. The other issue at hand is the request for the variance. And this is the northern face of the building, and it's really what faces the parking lot. And as we've been on the property, there is a former picture of the building. You can see the two signs that were there. I know we're moving forward, but the V. Marta sign and the Cornerstone sign. But the issue at hand is a lot of people park in the parking lot or come walking down the street. They go into Overland and they come out of Overland and they walk towards our business, and they don't really know what it is. And so that's why we're requesting a variance for that sign. I guess technically it may face Washington Street eventually. As we know, the signs in front of the building are the Washington Street signs, and so we feel we'd like to ask the board to make an exception to this variance, or make a variance approval for the similar sign as you see on Mulberry for Atelier by JCB.
Questions so far for the applicant?
Where's that sign going to be for the north-facing side of the building?
Well, we could either do a hanging sign right over the door. We could do a sign to the left, as you saw with the MARTA photo, or something similar closer to the window. We wanted to first get your approval and then work with the planning team on location and size. But that's why I submitted these two photos, so you could see what was there and get that perception that people have as they walk to the building. And we do see a lot of people coming in that direction. So
you're actually replacing those two with one?
Actually, those signs came down with the move, and so and then within the site plan, as we work through all of the numbers, we reduced a number of the signs to meet our total square footage. And then we did request a sign for this location, but we're told that it was the planning team was considering it a double second frontage sign, or even maybe a third, and so they were not going to suggest or approval. So here we are, hoping that the board here will approve.
Thank you. Any questions for our applicant? Other questions for our applicant? Barbara, any additional right now?
Not right now.
Mikkel?
Would you plan on coming, I don't know if would you have to come back before us based on placement of the sign if we approved, or is it just discrepancy of theirs?
It could be approved tonight based on their indication of what they'd like to have on that elevation. I was assuming that it would be the same 8.3 square feet that would match the JCB tasting salon sign on the south side, but that is a sign more similar to, there you see it right there, rather than one, bottom left, rather than one hung from the header. So what we need to get a better understanding on is how large the sign would ultimately be and what it would do to that remaining 17.5 square feet of signage. Overland has two signs right now. They probably exceed 17.5 square feet. So we have to be cautious about what we leave for that second building, or for that remaining building when it receives a new tenant. So that's my only caution.
And from our perspective, I would be happy to agree to that location on the corner, not a hanging sign, and a similar sign of design and size that's facing Mulberry.
Mikkel, other questions?
No, that's everything for me. Thank you.
So, what of the property does JCB currently own? I'm trying to figure out how all this fits together. From a sign, because you're doing signs for the Railway Inn, so have you worked with them? I mean,
well, we're required to do a comprehensive sign plan for the whole property. So, and my understanding is they have an easement for 7 or 8 parking spaces with the owners of the property, John and Robin Carboni. And so, but with that, the Carbonis have agreed to this change of the name to the Village versus a Whistle Stop, and are very pleased with the sign plan and in regard to the white and the black, the simplicity. You know, as you've seen, we've painted the buildings, but you know, we do not own the property. We are leasers of the property, though we do have a long-term lease.
okay, so,
And just for clarification, the parking spaces for the Railway Inn are actually located on the Whistle Stop / Village property parcel. So, by easement.
so you are leasing, JCB is leasing this whole thing here?
We currently lease almost all of the property on the Whistle Stop. There are some offices we do not lease, so the Yountville Sun and Ventank. But we are the master leaseholder of all the other buildings on the property.
So you have a ground lease for the parking lot?
Well, that's, I assume, part of our lease and access to it, except the railway parking spots. Those spots have been leased, or through an easement, have been given to the railway. And
So, and all I'm trying to get at is who is the proper applicant? And if staff is satisfied that JCB is the proper applicant,
Yes.
then I will let this go. But it just, it occurred to me that you're making signage for property that you don't at this point seem to have an interest in. But, so if you guys are satisfied, I'm good with it.
well, I think the only signage involved is for the parking. That's
Right.
the simple.
Right.
So.
What about the
And we all have, it's important for all of us to try to manage the parking. As we know, it's,
Absolutely.
How about the signs for the sheepskin? What do you call it? Overland. Are you replacing that eventually? Would that be part of what we're discussing here, the square footage?
that will come into play in the future, and I believe there's a condition of approval that we will have to meet the guidelines of the master sign program as approved. But as stated, there's 2 signs at Overland, which side by side almost. So our plan would be only to have 1 sign in the future with
So you're
whatever
gonna bring
plans
that-
are approved.
You're going to bring that into compliances with the total square footage of the
Yes.
signs for the whole village?
Yes, correct.
So when do you expect the signs to actually be installed?
We will start construction right away. It does take some time, even as we submitted this program almost 2 months ago, and we had some delays, which is why we missed last month's meeting, getting you the prototype samples. It still took another 3-4 weeks. Those signs just went up last week, and we got conditional approval with the understanding that if you did not approve the signs, we would be taking them down tomorrow. But even then, it took 3+ weeks to get that made and put up. So we're probably still looking at another month or 2, especially with the number of signs and the parking signs. But our goal, as everyone has seen, is to up the look and feel of the property, and we consider that an important part of it. So much so that we did not want to post the brown signs with JCB on it, and waited 2+ months
Right.
for approval.
So now, speaking of the actual design of the signs, are the finials, the signs that have the finials on the top, are they going to look like the ones that are already on the property? They look pretty pronounced in these renderings, and they look less pronounced when I drive the property at the point of them. Will they be more like the ones that are there now?
Our goal was to stay within the width and continue to use those posts so that we didn't have to tear them all out. I mean, obviously, we're going to reduce the number of signs, but we wanted to work within those posts. So,
Okay, so on your monument signs, you're trying to salvage the existing posts?
yes,
Okay.
or base. Yep.
And then I have a question, although I am really a big proponent of black and white, and I really appreciate your reducing the number of signs. I think one thing, when I drive it, the brown signs are not very glaring. I think even a reduced number of stark white signs with sort of sans serif black lettering might be kind of jarring. So I'm wondering if there's anything you'd be willing to do, even to paint some of them the soft gray. I mean, kind of play off your gray that you started, because you started with the gray trimmed in white, and now the Overland building went to all white. I just see in a small space, because no matter how you try to cut it down, there are a lot of signs in that space. Is there a way to go to silver or gray or something that might not be, hey, I'm a sign.
Well, I will note a lot of those signs are facing away from the street or hidden behind the hedges from a parking perspective. Most of the signs that you do see are just a few signs near the railway inn, and then obviously the couple of signs on the building. But it was our understanding we were trying to create a consistent theme and color pattern, and we really enjoy that crisp white feel in color. But we would be open to discussion if there were specific signs or to review those colors and that feel. I think the key was trying to just increase the elegance of the signage overall on the property and remain consistent. So I would defer to staff a little bit on that.
And
so.
I'm thinking even the ones that, the parking signs at front on Washington, if the posts were white and the backs were the solid gray, I mean, just something for my eye to take away the starkness of white, 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 white. And I guess when we get to staff comments, I'll ask them how they would feel about that, and I'll ask my other board members too. I
don't have the exact number, but I believe there was probably 17 parking signs currently on the property, and I believe
there are a lot, and
we're down to. I was just doing a quick count. I think 6 or 8. 6. So I think it's a significant decrease, and hopefully the way they're spread out won't stand out as you're expressing. So.
And then could you tell me, so you have right now for Atelier and for JCB, you have one 30 by 40 menu sign for each of those, correct? On the outside wall?
On the outside wall by the doors.
So JCB's is by the back door and Atelier is by the side
That's
there?
the Atelier door there.
Okay.
And then at the two front doors of Atelier and Salon that face Washington Street, there's 2 menu signs. And then on the back door facing the parking lot for the Salon, as there's a back entrance, there's another menu sign.
So you have 4 menu signs, 2 for each business. And then you would like to have a wall sign and a hanging sign for each business. Well, an over-the-door sign and a side wall sign for each business.
Well, we have each business has a hanging sign that faces Washington Street, and then there is a JCB Tasting Salon sign facing Mulberry. And so what we're asking for the variance is a sign facing the parking lot, as we feel it's almost its own entity, almost its own street, and is a separate entrance point, walking point for many people that come from Overland or even Vintage 1870 as they walk through the parking lot. So,
and I will say that I think, factually speaking, the JCB sign that faces the Mulberry extension, that really is a variance to begin with. So you're asking for a second variance. I mean, I understand there has been a sign there in the past, but that was a variance to begin with, just so you'll know. So you're asking for a second variance.
We just, as a business, want people to be able to see visually what business is at that location as they're walking.
And I want that for you too. Yeah. I do. But of course, I also am thinking we set precedent here when we say, okay, you can put a sign on a parking lot. We have to think what that means. And I get what you're saying. Somebody driving south on Washington, it's almost like a Washington frontage. And is the monument sign currently on the corner of Washington and Mulberry, is it illuminated now?
It is not.
But you propose to illuminate it?
I don't believe that's it. Is that in? I don't believe that's in the plan, though. We would not mind illuminating the signs, but I know that's a
I thought I saw something in
can of worms.
In one of the findings that said it, or in the staff report that said it was going to be shielded illumination, and I just wanted to. It's under 17.92110, finding C.
Yeah, actually, that is correct. There is, I believe, a light illuminating that sign, which is number 6, I believe, on our 5. Yes.
Okay. So that's all the questions I have for now. Anybody else have questions for staff?
For staff?
I'm sorry. For Mr. Blackwood.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I don't see anyone here, but I'll just ask if there's anyone from the public who wants to step up to the microphone on this project. Seeing none, back to questions for staff. Does anybody have any follow-ups?
So what was the initial variance or finding that allowed the previous sign on the north-facing side of the building to exist? Those two signs, actually. Yeah.
The one shown on the left was never an approved sign, so it doesn't have any legal nonconforming status. It's not an approved sign. It's neither of those. The other sign on that elevation was used to identify originally Coldwell Banker, but then the office for Cornerstone, and they're not proposing a sign there. You could potentially identify that upstairs space because it is a separate space, but again, it would cut against the existing signage, cut into.
Okay, so that second sign on the right
Was
was
approved.
granted due to the business upstairs and not the downstairs part.
Due to it being a separate use.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, that's my question.
Barbara, any follow-up for staff?
I guess about the white color, the matte color, they're not, you call it, the wooden sheen. Because that's one thing I'm really concerned for, glaring when people walk by with all the white looking at, when you walk down the street. Sometimes when you drive, there's glaring from the sign. It could blind you sometimes to see the pedestrian from coming across the street or something. We don't want that. So I'll make sure that the paint is matte, is not any glare.
I'll speak to that. Actually, the painter on the Atelier sign had a gloss on it.
Yeah, that's what I
And,
mean.
and we all rejected it immediately and sent it back and delayed the installation another week as we waited for them to do the current sign as it is. So
Thank you
with
for
that
doing
matter.
that. Yeah.
Yep.
Any other questions for staff?
No.
So I'd like to please just go through some of the proposed findings. The first one is under 17.92.030, finding number 1. The whistle stop that starts the Whistle Stop Center has utilized a freestanding sign. I would like to just make that finding the second sentence somehow and leave out everything except, they're entitled to the sign under the ordinance, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So I think let's just let it stand on its own if the other members are agreeable and just say, the ordinance allows a sign identifying the complex, whatever. On finding numbers 1 and 2, I know they only have the one, quote, monument sign, but they also have the 2 parking signs that count towards space allocation but are not permitted per se. So is there a way to really tie down that we're talking about this monument sign like either through an exhibit or something that says, these findings go to this one sign. And I just put that up for
We could
consideration.
number each of the signs on the matrix and then identify it in the findings.
Let's,
So to
that
start.
would be great, thank you. Finding number 3 in that same, under that .030 is the same thing. I personally have issues with the design, so if we change the, if we change anything about the design, we'll have to come back to that finding, is my only point.
Which, I'm sorry, just which design specifically?
I think the white is too much,
Okay.
all the white and the stark black type. And then going on to 030, but the next page under subchapter J, finding number 3. I think the square footage might have to be changed at 53 square feet, the
Yes.
proposed signage. And I don't know if it's up to us to make a finding that it leaves enough area available for future signage of the north building. I share staff's concerns that as we eat into this 27.5 square feet, we have a big building left with really a pretty small sign. So, you know, I don't know that we need that second sentence, especially given all this. Down 4, right after that, the applicant is proposing one freestanding sign at the corner. We have that. And also proposing freestanding directional signs. I'd just like to clarify that. And again, you're going to, if you'd identify them on your matrix that you're doing, you know, freestanding directional signs, numbers, blah, blah, and sort of clarify it instead of saying these are, say these are counted toward the maximum sign allotment, but are not, is it that they're not subject to our review? Or, I mean, what is it that we're saying there? They're outside the ordinance per se, but
Parking lot directional signs are allowed in addition to a site's
Okay.
total sign allotment.
so maybe something like these are allowed additional signs, but have been counted toward the maximum allotment, something like that. And then going to 92.040, the next section down. So both have included one additional sign adjacent to their entrances, and those are going to be identified on your matrix. And then under the proposed findings for 92.110, finding A, I would like to, for the board to consider and staff to consider taking out "in fact" in the first sentence and taking out the second sentence entirely. Again, I think when you change it from the railway to when you change it from Whistle Stop to the village, we kind of have tossed the railroad theme. So just a thought on that. And I think that's all that I have on my findings. On the Atelier, a request for a sign for Atelier, I mean, I'm open to that if the rest of the members are in favor of it, but I will say I would not be open for the applicant to come back later and say, we don't have enough signage for this other big building we have.
I agree with that, yeah.
And I would, if we make a finding that it should be allowed, I would like something like that to go in our finding, to say, you know, we discuss with the applicant, this is only going to leave you 8 square feet, or not very much for that whole building.
9.2.
Yeah, 9.2. So I think that's an issue.
Well, why don't I agree to that, we'll go through, because we're very close to filing our next set of documents, and review the plan and the signage for that project also, and make sure it fits within the plan before we put up any further signage on that face.
That's good. So we'll just hold on your request for an additional atelier for now.
Well, I would hope maybe gaining approval as long as it fits it within the signage allotment after resolution of the sign at the Overland space. Does that make sense? So
I'll just continue my comment to the board. I personally would not be in favor of that, because I think once the sign goes up and then somebody comes to us, and maybe it's not Mr. Blackwood, and says, gee, now I have a building, I would prefer to wait on Atelier until they look at their whole signage, their remaining signage footage. But I open that for discussion for you guys.
Are we very close for you to come forward with the Overland sign, building sign?
yes, we are very close, within a week or two to plan, to file our paperwork with the town and start that process for that location. So
we're not holding you up too much if we want to wait for the other proposal to come together with the north-facing sign?
No, not necessarily, though. I thought approval was for the whole property, and within that, the Overland sign would become, or whatever sign replaces that, an administrative review, as it would fall within the style of the signs on the property.
So you're willing to live with
so-
whatever's minimal square footage you got left for the
I'm
Overland building?
willing to not put up a sign until Sandra and the team, we come to an agreement on how much signage space is left after the new Overland sign is up or designed in review.
Can we go back to the photo of the face of building, just so I can show you the Washington Street frontage, and we can talk numbers. Oops. So, the existing Atelier sign on Washington, in the upper left-hand corner, that's 6.7 square feet. The JCB Tasting Salon sign is 13.9 square feet. And if you allow a sign similar to the lower left for Atelier on the north side to mimic this one on the south side, that would leave 9.2 square feet remaining for the other business. So that's somewhere between those two Washington Street facing signs for these businesses, to give you an idea of whether you think that is a fair allotment of the site signage. I understand Chair Dorman's comments, but this is a master sign plan, so the goal is to plan for all businesses on site and not to give away so much now that that business is inadequately signed in the future. So.
That is a concern. Yeah.
And while we're here, what is the sign in the upper right? Where is that going to go?
That's on the back side of the Overland building, in the courtyard.
Directory sign
so that's
for
a
the
courtyard
north
sign.
side of the courtyard.
All right, any further discussion of the Atelier sign request or anything else?
Again, since the north-facing side, I mean, as much as I would love to have a sign on the north-facing side of Atelier, if the other sign from Marta was non-compliant, I'd find it hard to deem this one as an exception or a variance. But I understand their frustrations in that when you're coming from that driving south or walking south, it is difficult to tell what's going on. Is there some sort of alternative where you can similar to what you have on the front window of Atelier? Isn't there like a sticker or something on the door? Is there anything you could do on the side door to at least help people?
Yeah, we could definitely look at that option. For sure, the way the door is currently, it's that window panel now, with the
and
wood.
Ateliers.
So it's,
Yeah.
because we did switch out the front door, so that's what we would have to look at. But as I said, we want to fall within the guidelines and work
Yeah.
with everyone here to do what's right. So.
It's
Barbara, final comments?
I guess, the concern is here, and we try to accommodate what you are trying to do, but obviously we're at kind of crossroad here. Until we see what you're going to be proposing for the overlaying building, it's hard for us not to tie the two together, see what we should do. Yeah, I think that's a concern.
And I agree with staff that we do have to look at this as the big picture project. So I would be not inclined for an additional Atelier sign at this time, not foreclosing it in the future, but at this time. And I still have concerns about the whiteness of the signs, and would appreciate some feedback on whether you could paint, like I say, at least the backs of them or some of them gray and give a little contrast there. Other than that, and the findings that I called out, those changes, other than that, I think it's a good project.
Are there plans in the future? Are you guys also looking to change the color of the JCB building, or to like an all white as well?
No.
Okay.
Both buildings have the property has been repainted.
Yeah.
So the colors you see is the plan. We did do the JCB building in a different tone of gray that we felt was too dark and too purple. So took us a little time to come to a decision on toning that down a little bit. And so, but the buildings are complete from a painting perspective. So as we planned.
Yeah, I understand your concern with the just white and black. White and something else maybe would have been okay, or cream. Not cream because the building's painted white now, but the reduction of the signs is significant, 17 to 6, and they are somewhat hidden as well. So yeah, it's not my favorite choice, but I'm not insanely concerned about it.
I'm happy to hear that.
Me too.
Well, I'm going to make a motion, and we'll see if I get a second. So I move to approve the project with the exception of the requested Atelier sign, with the changes to the findings that I proposed, and for the applicant to work with staff to turn at least some of the signs into gray, white, and black. Any seconds? Okay. Next motion.
I'm with you until I don't know how the gray would play in and which gray it would be. It would be I don't want the gray to be the only piece of gray in the entire, I'm going to use the word campus in this regard, because then I think the gray would seem out of place.
Well, I'm thinking the gray to match their building. So that, like, maybe the parking lot signs, the posts are gray or the back of the sign is gray. I mean, the monument sign on the corner is not my favorite, but I don't see a place for gray there. But the ones that are the post signs,
Right.
some sort of combination of gray and white.
Would the applicant consider that?
Yeah, if anything, I feel like the black is the harsh part of it. Like if it was the white with the gray to kind of be harmonious between the entire property.
I'm open to that too. I mean, this, the whole black and white thing I think is really,
What are your thoughts on, I mean, are you guys set on the white and black?
Can I text Jean-Charles in France? What time is it there?
I'm sure he'd be so happy to hear from
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure he would.
Top on his mind.
I know we spent a lot of time on this. We proposed gold at one point, went to the silver, the crisp white and black. But, I think as we've proven throughout this process, we're willing to work with the town and the board on these ideas and try to come to some compromise. So we would definitely look into it for sure.
So would be better.
How did what happened to the silver idea?
Oh, well, that's what the
number.
the letters, because
So not this silver?
No.
So it would be the silver
Yeah.
on
Well, that was for the JCB, for those particular businesses, as we said, to have that distinct sign that stands out for our particular business has allowed.
I actually took this picture on my phone just so you can see what it looks like right now. Sorry for everyone watching at home. They can't see.
Nathan, is that silver on
Yes.
white?
Yeah, the silver signs
I
look
like
great up right now.
Yeah, I don't have any objection to the silver. It's the freestanding signs that I
The ones that are
have.
proposed.
And I would be happy with something that just says, we'll work with staff to soften the starkness of the black and white. I don't presume to be a designer.
Yeah, and I think, too, the black and white is easier to read. It's the one thing I notice driving by quickly with the JCB is
It's true, yeah.
Yes.
it is a little more dulled or harder to differentiate, the background and the letters. So
So, okay, so that's my motion. I did not get a second, so I guess we need another motion.
I'm good with that motion if the last part, can we leave it a little ambiguity to work with staff on the color scheme?
Yeah, I agree with that.
It would be relying a lot on our taste.
Well, I think we could say
Within the context of the property palette?
right.
I think even that
Yeah.
doesn't provide.
Oh, y'all are no fun.
Well, we're bringing a recommendation that we think these are consistent with the property palette, so it's really hard
Right.
for us to all of a sudden come up with, what's a better solution?
So could we do a motion that says work with the staff to add gray as an accent color to the, what are these called? The
freestanding
post signs.
Standing post.
Well, the monument, I think, although it's not my favorite, I don't really see a place for gray on there. But the others, I think,
Yeah.
with the elements might
Well-
lend themselves to some color coordination.
My only concern is that these have been designed, so I would be uncomfortable approving those at staff level. Maybe it is better to come back before you.
Yeah, particularly we have not seen a sample of how they look.
I wouldn't want to make the wrong call, and you are the decision-making body for signs.
Okay, so apparently we can't do that.
So back and forth, more and more that I look at this and the amount of signs, I don't know that I'm too concerned with it. I think it's so minimal, it's so hidden. The signs aren't enormous in nature. Most of them are hidden in the parking lot or on the back side of the property or in the courtyard. The ones that are facing Washington Street or the other street, a lot are that Atelier JCB. So I think I'm okay with the white and black. To make all that conversation for nothing.
Okay, so somebody else can make a motion then. Mine failed for lack of a second.
I just want to remind you, we need a unanimous vote because you represent a quorum.
I will motion what Carrie had proposed, except we let the black and white stand. I do like the silver over the Atelier and JCB tasting room and the side sign on Mulberry, but I understand you try to have directional for people, customers. So everything else stands as Carrie proposed, except the red, or we'll let the black and white stand.
Does that work for?
That works for a
Is
motion.
that clear
I'll
for
second.
us?
Okay, so before we vote, I'm going to say something. I do not want to unduly delay you, but I have a very strong feeling that the white signs should not be black and white. And I would appreciate it as a citizen of the town if you would try to do something to soften them up some. That said, let's call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Well said.
Consider it done. Thank you.
If you less dark.
Thank you very much.
The black, less dark.
Very well said.
All right, solar array. Ooh, Nathan, you're up.
Okay.
Hold on, don't I have to call the item number? Item 16759, design review for new solar arrays to be installed at the Yountville Community Center, wastewater treatment plant, and pump station. Staff, please.
Okay. So, as I'm sure all of you are well aware of town council meetings from 2014, on September 16th, the Yountville Town Council adopted Resolution 3203-14, which authorized the town manager to approve a power purchase agreement with Soled Benefit Corporation. And what this did was it approved the the agreement spurred the installation of solar panels at 3 public facilities. The community center, located on Washington Street, I think you all know where that is. The wastewater treatment plant, located there behind the golf course, and the pump station. That is located, in order to access that from vehicle, you go all the way past St. Joan of Arc Catholic Church, turn along a private road. It's also somewhat viewable from Gateway Estates Mobile Home Park and parts of Rancho de Napa if you really look closely. Now, as part of that resolution, it was stated that the designs for these solar arrays were going to be presented to the Zoning and Design Review Board for design review, which is why we are here today. So first, let's talk about the community center one. Renderings are up on the screen. They're going to be approximately 6,000 square foot structures that will be constructed with a heavy gauge industrial style steel in order to support these the arrays really on the top of these structures. It needs to be that steel. The structure is going to cover most of the center 2 lanes, as shown probably best here in this rendering on the top left. Provide covered parking there, while also having the panels up high enough in order to get adequate sunlight in order to function the way they're supposed to. It'll feature setbacks of about 56 feet on the east rear property line and 35 feet from the north side property line. It doesn't consider FAR, as it is not an inhabitable structure. It's a structure that houses a solar panel. So it's going to be built at an angle that'll have a tilt of about 7.5 degrees. So to ensure vehicle clearance, the lowest edge of the structure will be 10 feet from the floor, and the higher side with that 7.5 degree angle is going to be about 13 feet from the floor, as the renderings show. One thing to note, the color is not finally decided on. You can paint that steel color that you all believe would fit. In the past, they have gone with other kinds of either a darker blue or a slate type color that has worked in the past. That's going to be up to the board to decide if there's a color that they think would fit the best in there. Town staff recommends that a galvanized steel with kind of that darker blue color would fit there, as it has worked in the past for other solar panels in other places. All right, so that is the community center one. Moving on to the pump station. The pump station system, it's located near the flood wall, south of the Gateway Mobile Home Park. It's positioned about 104 feet away from the nearest home. If you look at the rendering on the bottom left, we have the kind of blue squares there showing where the solar array is proposed. Then there is a detention basin of some sorts that captures any of the excess stormwater from the mobile home parks. It kind of fills that pool type thing in occurrences of a flood in the mobile home parks. And then on the other side of that pool, as I'm calling it, is the first home. Again, it's over 100 feet away. The structure is proposed to be 3 feet high on the low edge and 9 feet high on the high edge, again, to maintain that tilt that solar panels need in order to function properly. It's also proposed to be built with a medium gauge galvanized steel and aluminum. Then lastly is the big array at the treatment plant. It's going to be located on that corner adjacent to the golf course, and in anticipation of golf balls flying and hitting them, there will most likely be a net built up that we've seen in other golf courses around, just to make sure we can decrease damage to the panels as much as we can. The array will be composed of 9 different structures of varying length, with a height of 3 feet on the low edge again and 9 feet on the high edge, similar to that at the pump station. It's also going to be constructed of a galvanized steel and aluminum. With that, it is staff's opinion that these 3 arrays they usually do not trigger design review, typically, but because, again, the original resolution that approved the financing of these mentioned that these would come into design review, which is why it's before you today. In all 3 cases, staff is of the opinion that the design is appropriate for the site and context, and it is unlikely to have too much of an impact on surrounding property owners. The carport structure at the community center will provide shade and benefit to the cars that are parked beneath it. Additionally, the installation of all of these arrays will reduce dependence on traditional energy sources and contribute to the town's goal of decreasing its carbon footprint, which is consistent with the town's soon-to-come climate action plan. So with that, I'm here to answer any questions.
Will you go back to the previous slide? One more. So those poles that are holding up the solar panels, that's going into like a median, correct? Not
Correct.
just into the, okay.
Yeah, right now as it stands, we have a row of parking spots and then rocks.
Okay.
And then more parking spots. It's anticipated that these supporting beams will go into that rock medium.
Great.
There's also, I failed to mention, there's a number of small ornamental trees in those. Those would unfortunately be removed because trees don't do well when there's a structure over them.
That's my only question.
I guess this is probably shouldn't be our concern. The project has been approved and budget set aside. And is this within what was proposed and what was
Yes.
budgeted for?
Yes.
So we don't have to worry about it. We just approve the design and whether it's appropriate for the location.
Yeah, right now the board is simply asked to approve it on a design review level. Correct with what you said.
So why is it not going on the roof of the community center?
There's already solar panels up on the roof of the community center, and it kind of shows it on that top left rendering when you see the couple black strips
Oh,
there
in the
on
middle
top of the
there?
roof, and on the bottom one also, the bottom rendering, It also shows some of the Bartisono solar panels
Yes,
that are
I
there.
see.
We already have some up there. The goal is to add more,
And to go, like, try to get to 100% solar for the
as
community
close as
center?
possible.
Okay. Will we be losing any parking spaces at the end of the construction?
It's not anticipated.
Okay. And during construction or maintenance or repair, you'll just cone off the areas? Is that?
Yeah, we'll make sure that there's a proper traffic control system to ensure safety, as well as maintain as many parking spaces as is feasibly possible.
Yeah, and so you'll coordinate, I guess, with special events at the community center?
Yes,
and et
for
cetera,
sure.
et cetera. Okay. It looked like to me on the little hatch marks that there's some kind of a shade that falls on part of it from the existing community center building. One of the renderings says shade from E building.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if we moved it south, is that shade just minimal? It's
It's
just shown there because they had to? So
I think it's because it's a rendering. Those that have come in, there's been survey after analysis of the best positions to get
Okay.
the best sunlight in the area, and also without impacting neighbors.
And now, what are we supposed to pick the color of, the legs?
You don't have to pick.
Because I
pick
vote
the
for black
color.
and white all the way.
I just wanted to note that stainless steel, galvanized steel, is not something we are locked into. It will have some kind of shade color to it that we're going to do our best to make consistent with the community center, so it doesn't stand out as like a glaring.
Okay, so we don't actually pick a color. You just,
We'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
I can't even visualize it right now. I mean, I would like for it to match the community center, but I also, if the community center is kind of that rusty color, I don't.
Yeah.
Remember when we went through the orange for the Vine Trail?
Yes.
I think it should be emergency orange.
I think the goal would be to select something very neutral.
Subtle.
And subtle.
I'm okay with deferring to, as far as solar panels go, they look great.
Right. I think that's good, y'all. Make something that looks nice. Then, so the wastewater treatment facility, we hope to run the facility with it, correct? That's our goal of putting the panels?
Yeah, pretty much
Okay.
these panels here will help offset a fairly significant amount of our PG&E bill.
And the netting, will it affect the performance? I mean, it's not going to cast a shadow or anything? Again, I'm sure you've engineered this to death. but
Nominal.
I'm just asking.
The way it will affect is fairly nominal. It's going to be some kind of mesh, so sunlight is still going to be able to get through. It's not going to be just a clear drop cloth or anything. So it's the opinion of the architects and the solar company that we're working with that some kind of mesh netting up there will be better for it, with the slight shade it provides, rather than the potential of golf balls sitting there.
Agreed.
Because
seen
if
me
we have walked out there and
Yeah.
it's a
Agreed.
graveyard of golf balls.
Right.
Half are mine.
And then the pump station, I see we're removing one tree on our property. And the tree on the adjacent property still will shade the panels, right? But we've accounted for that in our engineering.
Yeah, there will most likely be some trimming that will occur. But again, with the engineering, when the solar company came out here, they figured
That's the best
that
place.
this is the best place for it.
Okay, have the gateway owners been notified, or will they be notified? I'm just
They-
curious about that.
Yes, they were notified of this public hearing tonight, and the project has been known that
Okay.
it's been going on.
And
Correct.
will they see the 9 foot over the flood wall?
There is a chance that the two homes that are about 100 feet away may see it, but again,
But they got
they need to
notice of
see
the
over
hearing.
the flood wall and kind of crank their necks in order to really look at it.
Okay, and they got notice of the hearing tonight.
Yes.
And for the homeowners, I realize it's 100 and some odd feet, but are there any reflection or heat issues that the panels could be associated with those homes, those back homes?
Yeah, admittedly, not an expert on it, but when I look just at the rendering and at the angle, it's actually pushing away the other direction from the homes.
That's what it looked like to me, but I just
Yeah.
wanted to bring it out in case anybody knew anything. Okay, that's all from me. Anybody else?
Nope.
I think I'm good.
All right. Do we have a motion to approve?
I move to approve as presented.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Thanks. We'll notify the applicant.
Yes, please.
You be notified.
And then the next item on the agenda is staff and board reports.
All right. Next week, you're all invited to a very important combined meeting with the Zoning Design Review Board and the Town Council. So the combined meeting will commence immediately after the Town Council meeting adjourns. The Town Council meeting agenda is very light. So we encourage all of you to come here at 6 o'clock, as the first item on the council agenda is the report about the community survey that we received. And that will most likely guide a lot of the conversations that we will have in this combined meeting with the council. A lot of the feedback we receive from the survey is also going to play a major part in the general plan update that is going to occupy our lives for the next foreseeable future for a while. Letting you know that staff in the last few weeks have met with various other organizations and municipalities that have recently gone through general plan updates, and we're making a roadmap, if you will, that we plan on sharing next week at this meeting. So strongly encourage you to make that priority to come to that meeting.
Is it open or closed?
It will be open and televised, I believe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That will be here.
Yes, it will be held in this room. I'm sure there was something. Okay. We also wanted to give just extra emphasis on the app that the town has issued, the MyVille app. It's in the Apple Store. It's also in the Android store. You just go in, type in MyVille. There's actually two apps called MyVille. Choose the one that has the town logo on it, rather than the one that is a video game. Okay? Strongly, it's a great app. We've discussed it before a few months ago in this meeting, but really keep using it. It's a great way to interact with town staff, to be able to report a crack that you see, or an issue in a sidewalk, or a pothole, or a code enforcement case. Snap a picture, put it in the app, and it comes to us. So we're able to respond to it right away. That picture that you take is also tied to GIS points. So even if you say, oh, I'm not really sure what the address of this house is, it's all right, we do. Oh. So it's a really cool system that we are excited to roll out. You're going to see it a lot more talked about on our website and social media, and hopefully in the newspaper as well in the upcoming few weeks and months.
I have to warn you, I'm not very high tech. So
we made it as simple as possible. You can do it. You do have it?
Yep.
I
Wonderful.
have it. Even I can use it. So I have one question before we leave. What, the Wine Country Connection?
Mm-hmm.
There's a sign outside their door. Did I miss a meeting?
That sign was approved as part of the already approved master sign plan for that area. So new signs can go up as long as they are consistent with the already approved plan for the complex.
What about the design of it? I understand the sizing. I'm curious about the design of it.
I don't know
So
what
we
we're
viewed the
talking
color and design is consistent with the building, and it was the same dimensions as existing. They had wanted to change that, and with that change, we let them know that it would need to come before the ZDRB. But the simple colors and colors that are found on the property within the existing dimensions of the approved master sign plan, we approved it at staff level.
Okay, I just didn't know the process, and suddenly there
You
it
saw a new
was.
sign.
New sign.
For sure.
about. Where is that? I have no idea.
Do you remember where the
Grosinger
Grosinger?
wine shop?
Right.
right next to the
Oh,
Chamber
they
of Commerce
change owners.
office.
Yeah,
Yes.
I see.
Okay. Anything else?
Nope.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.